Hey, how's it going? Are you into high things? Are you high? Well, this is a video for you. We're going to talk about one of the highest manned hot air balloons in all of history. Let's begin. Born to a watchmaker in London in 1809, Glaisher expressed an interest in scientific instruments on a visit to Greenwich Observatory in 1833. He joined the Cambridge Observatory as an assistant to Professor George Airy. Perfect name for what's about to happen. Making a series of observations with the Halley's Comet in 1835. Following his mentor back to Greenwich Observatory in 1835, Glaisher went on to join the Royal Astronomical Society in 1841, and also was elected a Fellow on the Royal Society in 1849 as well. Furthermore, he was a founding member of the Royal Aeronautical Society in 1866 and the Meteorological Society of 1850. That is quite a fascinating tale. He did a lot. On September 5th of 1862, the scientist was taking one of his first balloon flights, and alongside his compass, thermometers, bottles, and brandy, he had decided to bring along 6 birds as well. Why 6? I'm not sure. But one was thrown out at the height of 3 miles, he later wrote. When it extended its wings, it dropped like a piece of paper. The second at 4 miles. It flew vigorously round and round, apparently taking a dip each time. A third was thrown out between 4 and 5 miles. It fell downwards as a stone, unfortunately. No sooner had he noted these observations than he began to feel the balloon sickness, unfortunately, upon himself. No sooner had he noted these observations than he began to feel balloon sickness himself. His arm had been resting on the table, but it failed to respond when he tried to lift it. Alarmed, he tried to call out to his aeronaut, Henry Coxwell, but the words froze in his mouth, and he had lolled helplessly in one side. Glaisher knew the end was near. In an instant, darkness overcame him. He believed, as he said, I would experience nothing more as death would come endlessly. We speedily descended. Amazingly, both Coxwell and Glaisher survived thanks to some last-minute luck, but had they would have drifted to their deaths at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere, that would be quite unfortunate, of course. Their plight is one of the greatest daredevil stories in the history of aviation, and perhaps even a glimpse into the future of air travel, or space travel itself. The aerial ocean Glaisher had first set its sights skyward as he surveyed Ireland, mapping the contours of its highest peaks. He said, I was often compelled to remain, sometimes for long periods, above or enveloped in the cloud. I guess his head was in the cloud. He said, I was thus led to study the colors of the sky, the delicate tints of the clouds, the motion of masses in the air that form the crystals of the snow. Very artsy and poetic. His interest was only piqued as he moved to the great observation of Cambridge and Greenwich. Often when a barrier of cloud has suddenly concealed the stars from view, I have wished to know the cause of their rapid formation, he said, and the process in action around them. Beautiful. Should have been an artist. Anyway, ballooning had progressed somewhat during that time frame, since Les Frères Roberts tried to guide their balloon flights with oars and umbrellas at the end of the 18th century, and ballooning was now increasing interest of scientists during that time frame, like Glaisher. In contrast to today's hot air balloons, their vehicles were filled with a light gas, like hydrogen, allowing the aeronauts to rise with the ease of ascending vapor, carried by the imprisoned gas, as Glaisher put it. To rise, they would have thrown sand out of the basket, and descended, they opened a valve to let some of the gas out of the balloon, just like a toot. Once they were close enough to Earth, they would then release an anchor, he said, that would hook into a tree or hedge and stop them being dragged around on the ground. The activist at the British Museum and Library, John Baker, was also saying how this works with hot air balloons, whereas others had always kept within view of the ground below. However, Glaisher wanted to reach higher, of course, to explore the aerial ocean, which offered a boundless sea of everything. Persuading the British Association for the Advancement of Science to fund this trip, Glaisher teamed up with the expert balloonist, Henry Coxwell, to take these voyages into the unknown of the sky or the heavens. Their quest was undoubtedly British to understand the atmospheric forces governing the weather down on Earth. he was ahead of his time to say the least. Maybe he even spent his head in the clouds. He spent lots of time manufacturing suitable apparatuses, said Baker. After some initial hiccups, and the pair took their first flight on the 17th of July, 1862, taking off from a UK location at 9:43 in the morning. Within 12 minutes, they had passed through the clouds. Under the heat of the sun, the balloon had enormous construction containing 90,000 cubic feet of gas. That's a lot of gas. Filled out of its assumption that almost perfect sphere. The sky, he noted, had turned into a deep blue. With the cheap and accessible air travel today, it is easy to forget the romance of traveling thousands of feet above the ground, like during that time frame with Glacier. In 1862, however, Glacier was among a small handful of people who had seen the world in a new sort of way. His descriptions help us see those sights with fresh eyes. He describes the supreme beauty of the clouds, presenting at times mountain scenes of endless variety and grandeur. The shadow of the balloon on the clouds below was surrounded by a kind of tinted hue with prismatic colors, beautiful like a rainbow. His later flights departed from Crystal Palace in London, offering a unique view of the British capital. The illuminated dials of Winchester clock was 2 dull moons, as he wrote. They appeared like a line of brilliant fire. The closest comparison he thought was the Milky Way. On a clear dark night, the field of view appeared covered with gold dust, to be possessed of the power to see those minute spots of light as brilliant stars. The feated flight on the September 5th, again in UK or Wolverhampton, began smooth enough. A flood of strong sunlight burst upon us with a beautiful blue sky without a cloud, and beneath us a lay of magnificent sea of clouds and surface. It varied from endless hills, hillocks, and mountain chains, and with many snow-white turfs arising from it. I'm not sure what hillocks are, but we go on. As they rose beyond 5 miles, however, the temperature dropped below -20 degrees Celsius, and he began to notice difficulties with his vision. He said, "I could not see the fine column in the mercury in the wet bulb thermometer, nor the hands of the watch, nor the fine divisions on any instrument. Clearly, they needed to descend, yet the balloon's valve line had become entangled in other ropes, unfortunately. Coxwell had to climb out of the basket to release it, but while he was dangerously climbing among the riggings, Glacier was slowly losing consciousness. I don't know about you, but I cannot climb over 20,000 feet on a balloon. Would you? Let me know down in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Thank you. We continue. Up on the ring, Coxwell felt that he too was losing control of his limbs. Realizing that his life was at the risk, he grabbed hold of a valve line with his teeth and yanked it several times with his head. To his relief, it opened and they began their descent. Glacier awoke to hear Coxwell muttering vaguely above him. "I've been insensible," he said, but wasted no time to returning to his experiments. I then drew up my legs and took a pencil to begin observations, as he recorded in his book, Travel in the Air, creative name for a book. Of the pigeons, only one remained with them by the time they had reached the ground. It seemed so traumatic by the experience that it clung to Glacier's hand for 15 minutes. Of course it would. Before taking flight, the pair estimated that they had risen to 37,000 feet, or 7 miles, or 11 kilometers, the highest altitude that has been manned flight that reached at that point. Neither Glacier nor Coxwell could have fully understood the cause of their balloon illness. The cold and the lack of oxygen will have certainly contributed to that, since they were as high as a jumbo jet. But a recent paper in Neurology journal suggests they may have also been suffering the bends, such as divers experience if they rise too quickly. Thanks to falling pressure during the rapid ascent, gases like nitrogen and oxygen are released in the blood, forming bubbles in the neural tissue. The result is nausea, paralysis, and loss of consciousness. Sounds like a great time, just like a roller coaster. Glacier reported somewhat stoically that he had been unscathed by the incident. Of course he didn't, probably because he was unconscious most of the time. He also said no inconvenience followed by this insensibility. He went on to make another 21 flights, recording observations that were crucial for our understanding of weather. Good job, man. Discovering, for instance, the way raindrops form and gather moisture as they hurtle towards Earth, like in clouds. And also noting that the winds change speed as they rise or fall through the atmosphere, he noted. On one flight, he said, they took off with no wind on the surface but flew 120 miles, which proved that the wind was different at a different altitude, says Baker. Quite fascinating. Today, these kinds of measurements are made in unmanned balloons for the meteorology of the clouds. Although some daredevils are still using balloons for equally interesting journeys. Felix Baumgartner, for instance, rose 24 miles in a helium balloon for his famous skydive from space, which he was unconscious for about 5 minutes of it. And according to some, ballooning may even become the preferred means to space tourism. I think I'd rather take a ship. Advised by NASA astronaut Michael Lopez, the Spanish company 02 Infinity plans to use a massive helium balloon to float into near space, reaching around 21 miles above the Earth. See, what if it pops? That's my only thing. A point beyond 99% of the atmosphere is the location, 21 miles up. Although this is nowhere near the altitude planned by the likes of Virgin Galactic, which has already gone up. It should be far further than that, so I'd rather go in a spaceship, of course. Surrounded by blackness and the source of profundity, the advantage is that a balloon journey should be much more sincere than a ride on a rocket-powered spaceplane, and much more quiet as well. Glacier, who now has a crater on the moon named in his honor, would surely approve of that matter. He said, "We seem to be citizens of the sky, separated from the earth by a barrier which seems implausible," as he wrote in his ballooning experiences. In the upper world, to which we seem now to belong, the silence and quiet are so intense that peace and calm seem to be reign alone, which is quite beautiful and quite understandable, but is quite frightening as well to be looking and right there is the end of the world with you being in a little balloon that could pop at any minute. Anyway, would you take a balloon ride into space? Would you take a balloon ride at least 100 feet? I'd maybe do 101 feet and then I'm good. I've heard enough stories of crashes of hot air balloons, but it's quite fascinating and good job on Glacier and Baker. Thanks for watching. Have a great one. Bye.